The wind carried the scent of pine resin and distant rain as Adrian Zimmerman's boot slipped on the rain-slicked stone. And in that terrible moment of weightlessness, he knew he was going to die. The ridge had looked stable enough when he had ventured out to check the old trapline his uncle had warned him about. But the moss-covered rocks betrayed him, and suddenly there was nothing beneath him but air and the rushing sound of his own breath. He hit an outcropping halfway down that spun him sideways, the impact driving the air from his lungs, and then he was tumbling, crashing through scrub pine branches that tore at his clothes and skin before the final brutal collision with the rocky ground below knocked consciousness from his mind like snuffing a candle. When awareness flickered back, it came in waves of agony so profound he could not draw breath to scream. His right leg was bent at an angle that legs were never meant to bend, bone protruding through torn flesh and fabric. His left arm hung useless, the shoulder dislocated and possibly broken. Blood ran hot down his face from a gash somewhere in his scalp, and each shallow breath felt like knives in his ribs. The sky above was turning the deep blue of evening, which meant he had been unconscious for hours. He tried to call for help, but only a weak croak emerged from his throat. The trapline ran along the border between human settlements and orc territories, which meant no one would come looking for him here. His uncle would assume he had stayed overnight in the village. By the time anyone realized he was missing, he would be dead from blood loss or exposure. The thought brought neither fear nor resignation, only a distant sadness that his life would end at 23 in a place no one would think to search. He had survived 2 years of border skirmishes, had made it home alive when so many others had not, only to die from a careless slip on wet stone. The irony was almost funny, though he lacked the strength to laugh. He did not hear her approach over the sound of his own labored breathing and the distant call of evening birds. The first indication that he was not alone was a shadow falling across him, blocking out the fading light. Adrian forced his eyes open, expecting perhaps a bear or mountain cat come to finish what the fall had started. Instead, he found himself staring up at a face that made his battered brain struggle to process what he was seeing. She was an orc. There was no mistaking that. Her skin was the deep green of forest moss, her face broad and strong-boned, with small tusks curving up from her lower jaw. Her dark hair was bound back in a practical braid, and she wore the simple leather and homespun clothing of a frontier dweller. She was tall, probably close to 6 feet, with the kind of muscular build that came from hard physical labor. Her amber eyes were wide as she stared down at him, and he could see genuine shock written across her features. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other. Adrian's military training screamed at him that orcs were the enemy, that she might kill him where he lay helpless. But she made no move to harm him. Instead, she knelt beside him with surprising gentleness, her large hands hovering over his broken body as if afraid to touch him. "How long have you been here?" Her voice was deep and rough, but the words were perfectly clear, spoken in the common tongue with barely an accent. "Hours," Adrian managed, the single word taking enormous effort. "Fell from up there." She followed his weak gesture toward the ridge high above and let out a low whistle. "That you are alive at all is a miracle, but you will not stay alive much longer without help." She looked around as if searching for someone, then back down at him with what might have been conflict warring in her expression. "Your people's settlement is 2 days' walk from here. Mine is closer, but we have no healers skilled enough for wounds like these." "Then I am dead anyway," Adrian said, surprised at how calm he sounded. "No." The word came out fierce and decided. "The hermit Borin lives 8 miles north. He was a combat healer in the old wars, knows more about keeping broken bodies alive than anyone else in these mountains." I can carry you there before full dark if I move quickly. Adrian tried to process this. An orc woman proposing to save his life by carrying him 8 miles to a healer. It made no sense. Orcs and humans had been at war, cold or hot, for generations. Even now, in this time of uneasy peace, the two peoples rarely interacted except through violence. "Why?" he asked. She met his eyes and he saw something raw and honest there. "Because I found you, because you are dying." Because she stopped herself, jaw tightening. "Because it is the right thing to do. Now be quiet and let me work. This is going to hurt." That was the only warning he got before she began splinting his broken leg with pieces of wood and strips torn from her own shirt. Adrian had thought he knew what pain was, had been wounded in battle before, but this was something entirely different. The world went white and then gray and then mercifully black as consciousness left him again. He surfaced briefly to find himself moving, cradled against a chest that was surprisingly soft, despite the hardness of the arms that held him. Each of her strides jarred his broken body, and he could not stop the sounds of pain that escaped him. "I know," she said quietly, not breaking her pace. "I am sorry, but we must keep moving." "What is your name?" he asked, needing something to focus on besides the agony. "Kara." She glanced down at him. "And yours?" "Adrian." "Well, Adrian, you are heavier than you look, and I have a long walk ahead of me. So if you could refrain from dying before we reach Boren, I would appreciate it." The dry humor in her tone startled a laugh out of him that immediately became a gasp of pain. "I will do my best. See that you do." But there was something almost gentle in her voice now, and her arms adjusted their grip to hold him more securely against her, as she continued her ground-eating stride through the darkening forest. Adrian drifted in and out of awareness as she carried him. Sometimes he opened his eyes to see trees passing overhead, their branches dark against a deepening sky. Other times, he became aware of her breathing, steady and controlled despite the exertion, or the warmth of her body against his own. Once he heard her speaking in a language he did not understand, words that sounded like prayer or plea. When he managed to focus on her face, he saw grim determination etched there, her jaw set and her eyes fixed on the path ahead. How much farther? He asked at one point when a particularly bad jolt had pulled him back to something resembling consciousness. 3 miles, maybe less. The trail is easier now." She looked down at him, and even in his haze of pain he could see concern in her eyes. "Your bleeding has slowed. That is good. Stay awake if you can. Keep talking to me." "About what?" "Anything. Tell me why you were up on that ridge alone, checking trap lines. My uncle's land. He is getting old, cannot manage it all himself anymore." The words came slowly, his tongue feeling thick in his mouth. "What about you? Why were you there? Hunting. I saw the ravens circling and went to investigate. I thought perhaps they had found a deer carcass, something I could salvage." She shifted her grip slightly. "I did not expect to find a broken human at the bottom of a cliff. Sorry to disappoint." That got an unexpected sound from her, something between a snort and a laugh. "You are a strange one, making jokes while half dead. Most humans I have encountered are terrified of my kind. You should be screaming or trying to attack me, not attempting humor." "I am too tired for terror," Adrian admitted. "And you are saving my life. Seems ungrateful to attack you. Practical reasoning. I approve." She ducked under a low branch, moving with a sureness that suggested she knew these trails well. "Though your people would likely say I should have left you to die, mine certainly will. Will you get in trouble for this?" She was quiet for a long moment. "I left the clan 2 seasons ago. I live alone now in a cabin near the eastern meadows, so there is no one to trouble me about my choices." But there was something in her voice that spoke of old wounds, of isolation that was perhaps not entirely chosen. "I am sorry," Adrian said, though he was not entirely sure what he was apologizing for. Save your sorrow for yourself. You are the one with broken bones. But her tone had softened slightly. The landscape began to change as they walked, the dense forest giving way to more open ground. The moon had risen, nearly full, providing enough light to see by. Adrian could make out the shape of a small cabin in the distance, smoke rising from its chimney. "There," Kara said, and there was relief in her voice. "We made it." She began to move faster, and Adrian bit down on the sounds of pain that wanted to escape as the increased pace jarred his injuries. Then they were at the door, and Kara was kicking it with one booted foot. "Boren, open up. I have a man here who will die without your help." The door swung open to reveal an old human man with a wild beard and wilder hair, his eyes sharp and alert despite his apparent age. Those eyes took in the scene in an instant: the orc woman, the broken human in her arms, the blood. "Inside," he snapped. "Put him on the table. Carefully." Kara carried Adrian into a cabin that smelled of herbs and wood smoke, laying him down on a sturdy wooden table with as much gentleness as she could manage. Even so, Adrian could not contain the cry of pain that escaped him. The healer was already moving, lighting lamps, pulling jars and bottles from shelves. "How long ago was he injured?" 5 or 6 hours since the fall. Maybe 8 by the time I found him." Kara stepped back from the table, giving the healer room to work, but Adrian could see she did not go far. Boren began a rapid examination, his hands moving with practiced efficiency over Adrian's body. "Compound fracture of the right tibia and fibula, dislocated shoulder, possibly fractured clavicle, multiple broken ribs, probable concussion, severe lacerations, blood loss." He looked up at Kara. "You carried him how far?" 8 miles, maybe a bit more." The old man let out a low whistle. "That alone probably saved his life. Another hour and he would have bled out or gone into shock so deep he would not have come back." He moved to a cupboard and began pulling out supplies. "This is going to take all night. He is going to scream. If you have a weak stomach, leave now." "I am staying," Kara said firmly. "Suit yourself." Boren turned to Adrian, and his craggy face showed something that might have been sympathy. "Boy, I am going to give you something for the pain, but it will not be enough. I need you conscious to tell me if I am cutting off circulation or causing damage I cannot see. Do you understand?" Adrian nodded weakly. "Do what you must." What followed was the longest night of Adrian's life. Boren worked with the skill of someone who had put countless broken soldiers back together, but there was no way to make the process anything less than agonizing. He set the leg first, pulling the bone back into alignment and cleaning the wound before splinting it properly. Adrian screamed until his voice gave out, his hands gripping the edges of the table so hard his knuckles went white. Through it all, he was aware of Kara standing near his head, her presence a strange comfort. At one point, when the pain threatened to pull him under into darkness, he felt her hand close around his, her grip strong and steady. "Stay with us, Adrian," she said, her rough voice close to his ear. "You have come this far, do not give up now." He held onto that hand like a lifeline, held onto her voice, and somehow found the strength to stay conscious as Boren reset his shoulder, stitched the gash in his scalp, wrapped his ribs. The healer worked through the night, and when the first gray light of dawn began to seep through the cabin windows, he finally stepped back from the table. "That is all I can do," Boren said, wiping blood from his hands. "The rest is up to him. If infection does not set in, if his lungs do not fill with fluid from the broken ribs, if he does not develop brain fever from the head wound, then he might live. Might." He looked at Kara. "He needs constant care for at least a week. Someone to watch for fever, to help him with his needs, to make sure he eats and drinks. I am too old to do it alone. Can you stay? Adrian felt Kara's hand tighten around his for just a moment. I can stay, she said quietly. Good. Boren moved toward a doorway that presumably led to a sleeping area. Then I am going to sleep for a few hours. Wake me if his condition changes. There is food in the larder, water in the bucket. Try to get some liquid into him soon. He paused in the doorway, looking back at Kara with an expression Adrian could not quite read. You did a good thing bringing him here. Not many would have. I know, Kara said, and there was weight in those two words. After the healer had gone, silence fell in the cabin, broken only by the crackle of the fire and Adrian's labored breathing. He was still holding Kara's hand, he realized, and she had not pulled away. Thank you, he managed, his voice a hoarse whisper from all the screaming. You saved my life. Thank me if you survive the week, she said, but there was no real bite to the words. She looked exhausted, he realized, her face drawn and pale beneath the green of her skin. You should rest. So should I, but first, let me get you some water. She gently extracted her hand from his and moved to the bucket Boren had indicated. Adrian watched her move around the cabin with the ease of someone comfortable in practical spaces, her movements efficient despite her obvious fatigue. She returned with a cup of water and helped him drink, supporting his head with surprising gentleness. The water was cool and sweet, and Adrian had not realized how thirsty he was until it touched his lips. More, she asked when he had drained the cup. Please. She brought him 2 more cups before he finally shook his head. Enough. I feel like I might burst. That is good. Boren said to get liquid into you. She set the cup aside and pulled a stool close to the table, settling onto it with a sigh. I will stay here while you sleep. In case you need anything. You need rest too, Adrian said. You carried me 8 miles and have been awake all night. I will rest when you are stable. Her tone left no room for argument. Close your eyes, Adrian. Sleep. He wanted to protest, but his body was already surrendering to exhaustion, and whatever herbs Boren had given him for the pain. His eyes drifted closed, and his last conscious awareness was of Kara sitting beside him like a guardian, her presence solid and reassuring in the morning light. When he woke again, the sun was high and streaming through the windows. Pain radiated through his entire body, a deep ache punctuated by sharp stabs whenever he tried to move. He must have made some sound because suddenly Kara was there, leaning over him with concern clear on her face. Easy, she said. Do not try to move too much. How do you feel? Like I fell off a cliff, Adrian said, attempting humor even through the pain, her mouth quirked in what might have been the beginning of a smile. At least your spirit is intact. Are you thirsty? Hungry? Both. She brought him water first, then a bowl of thin broth that smelled of herbs and chicken. Boren made this before he left. He said you need to eat to rebuild your strength, but nothing too heavy yet. She helped him drink the broth slowly, patient when he had to pause to catch his breath or when the movement of swallowing pulled at his broken ribs. Where did Boren go? Adrian asked between sips, to check his trap lines. He said he would be back before evening. Kara set the empty bowl aside. He also left instructions for your care. I need to check your splints, watch for signs of fever or infection, change the dressing on your leg wound. He was very thorough. You do not have to do this, Adrian said. You have already done so much. I told Boren I would stay, and I keep my word. She met his eyes steadily. Besides, where else would you go? You cannot walk. You cannot even stand. Until your bones begin to heal, you are dependent on others for even the most basic needs. Does that bother you, being helpless, being cared for by an orc? Adrian considered the question honestly. It should bother me, I think. I was a soldier. I fought against orc raiders along the border. I saw friends die in those skirmishes. I was taught to see your people as the enemy." He paused, studying her face. "But I cannot reconcile that image with the woman who carried me 8 miles to save my life. So no, it does not bother me. It confuses me perhaps, but it does not bother me." Something shifted in Kara's expression, a slight softening around her eyes. "You are honest, at least. I can respect that." She stood, moving to the healer's supplies. "I am going to check your wounds now. Tell me if anything I do causes sharp pain beyond what you are already feeling." She worked with careful competence, unwrapping bandages and examining the stitches in his scalp and the wound in his leg. Her hands were gentle despite their strength, and Adrian found himself watching her face as she worked. She was not beautiful by human standards. Her features were too broad, too strong, her tusks preventing her mouth from closing in the delicate way human women's did. But there was something compelling about her nonetheless, a solidity and directness that was strangely attractive. "The stitches look good," she said, interrupting his thoughts. "No signs of infection yet. That is very fortunate." She began rewrapping the bandages with practiced efficiency. Boren left a paste to apply to the wounds twice a day. He says it will help prevent corruption of the flesh. "You seem comfortable with healing work," Adrian observed. "I learned some basics from the clan healer before I left. It is practical knowledge in the wilderness." She finished with the bandages and straightened, wiping her hands on a cloth. "You should rest more. Boren says sleep is when the body does most of its healing." "I have been resting. Tell me something instead. Why did you leave your clan?" Kara's expression closed off instantly, her jaw tightening. "That is not a conversation for now. I am sorry. I did not mean to pry." She shook her head slightly. "It is not about prying. It is about—" She stopped, seeming to gather herself. "I will tell you, perhaps, when you are stronger. When we know if you will survive. But not now. Fair enough." Adrian shifted slightly, trying to find a position that hurt less, and failed. Every part of him ached. "Can I ask you something else instead?" "You may ask. I may not answer." "Why are you really doing this?" "Saving me, staying to care for me. You said it was the right thing to do, but there must be more to it than that. You are risking a great deal, being here with a human. If word gets back to your people—" "I have no people anymore," Kara interrupted, her voice hard. "I made that choice when I left the clan. And as for why," she was quiet for a moment, her amber eyes distant. "When I found you at the bottom of that cliff, broken and bleeding and dying, I saw someone who needed help. Not a human, not an enemy, just someone who would die if I did nothing. And I realized I was tired of death, tired of the hatred between our peoples, tired of pretending that killing and dying for that hatred makes any kind of sense." She looked at him directly. "So I chose differently. I chose to help instead of harm. Maybe it is foolish. Maybe it will bring me nothing but trouble, but it was my choice to make, and I made it." Adrian found he had no words for the emotion that swelled in his chest at her honesty. "Thank you," he said finally, "for choosing to help, for choosing me." "Do not romanticize it," Kara said, but there was no real sharpness in her tone. "You were dying and I happened to be there. That is all. If you say so." But Adrian did not believe it was that simple, and from the way Kara turned away, he suspected she did not either. The days that followed settled into a routine. Boren returned that first evening and checked Adrian's condition, pronouncing himself cautiously optimistic about the lack of infection. The old healer proved to be gruff but kind, with a dry sense of humor and a wealth of stories from his years as a combat medic. He treated Kara with casual respect, showing none of the prejudice Adrian had seen so often from humans toward orcs. "I am too old to care about what skin color someone has," Boren said when Adrian asked him about it. "I have stitched together soldiers from every race and nation over the years. Blood all looks the same once it is spilled. Bones all break the same way. Pain sounds the same in every language. You learn what matters and what does not after a few decades of that work. Kara took charge of most of Adrian's care, with Boren teaching her what she did not already know. She helped him eat and drink, changed his bandages, checked his splints, and even helped him with the humiliating necessities of bodily functions when he could not manage on his own. Through it all, she remained matter-of-fact and gentle, treating his embarrassment with pragmatic kindness. "You would do the same for me if our positions were reversed," she said when he tried to apologize for his dependence. "Bodies are bodies. They have needs. There is no shame in requiring help to meet those needs." As the days passed and Adrian grew stronger, they talked. At first, the conversations were simple things: observations about the weather, questions about Boren's herbs and tinctures, idle comments about the birds visible through the window. But gradually, they grew deeper and more personal. Adrian told her about his childhood on his uncle's farm, about joining the border militia more out of a sense of duty than any real hatred for orcs, about the friends he had lost in the skirmishes, and the growing disillusionment he had felt with the endless cycle of violence. He spoke of his parents, dead from fever when he was young, and of his uncle who had raised him with rough affection and practical wisdom. Kara listened with attention that felt genuine, asking questions that showed she was truly interested in his answers. And slowly, she began to share her own story. She had been part of a large clan that ranged through the northern territories, she told him. She had trained as a scout and hunter, had been good at her work, but she had grown uncomfortable with the clan's increasing raids on human settlements. "I began to question whether we were really defending our lands or simply perpetuating the same cycle of violence that humans accused us of starting," she said one afternoon, as she helped him drink some of Boren's restorative tea. "I spoke up in council, argued that we should try to negotiate to find ways to share the borderlands rather than fight over them. I was shouted down, told I was weak, that I had a human's heart in an orc's body." "That must have been hard," Adrian said quietly. "It was. But what was harder was watching young warriors go out on raids and not come back. Watching human prisoners being brought in, some of them barely more than children. Seeing the hatred in everyone's eyes and knowing it would never change as long as we kept fighting." She set the cup aside, her expression distant. "So I left. Walked away one night with just my weapons and the clothes on my back. Found a place far from both human and orc settlements and built a cabin. I thought if I could not change the cycle, I could at least remove myself from it." "Do you miss it, the clan?" "Sometimes. I miss my sisters. I miss the communal work, the shared meals, the sense of belonging." She was quiet for a moment. "But I do not miss the killing, and I do not miss being told that mercy is weakness." "Mercy is not weakness," Adrian said firmly. "What you did for me that took incredible strength. You risked your safety, walked 8 miles carrying a full-grown man, and stayed to care for a stranger from a people who have given you little reason to show kindness. That is the opposite of weakness." Kara looked at him with an expression he could not quite read, something vulnerable showing through her usual stoic mask. "You are strange, Adrian Zimmerman. Most humans would not see it that way." "Then most humans are fools." The words came out more vehement than he had intended, but he did not take them back. A smile ghosted across her face, small but genuine, and Adrian felt something warm unfurl in his chest at the sight of it. By the end of the first week, Adrian's condition had stabilized enough that Boren declared him out of immediate danger. "The bones are setting well, no sign of infection, and your lungs sound clear," the old healer announced after his examination. "You are going to live, boy. Though you will be bedridden for several more weeks, and it will be months before you can walk properly again." "Months," Adrian repeated, his heart sinking. "But my uncle will need help with the farm, and I cannot impose on your hospitality for that long." "You cannot do much farm work with a broken leg regardless," Boren pointed out. "And as for my hospitality, I am old and set in my ways. I prefer my solitude. Once you are able to be moved another week or two, you will need to convalesce somewhere else." Adrian felt panic rise in his chest. He had no money to pay for lodging in the village, and his uncle's cabin was a day's travel away over rough terrain he could not possibly navigate on crutches with his injuries. "I understand," he said quietly. "I will figure something out." "He can come to my cabin," Kara said suddenly. Both men turned to stare at her. She met their gazes steadily, though Adrian could see tension in the set of her shoulders. "It is isolated and well-stocked. I can continue to care for him there until he is healed enough to return to his uncle's land." "Kara, I cannot ask you to do that," Adrian protested. "You have already done so much. You are not asking, I am offering." Her tone left no room for argument. "It makes sense practically. Boren wants his space back. You need somewhere to recover, and I have the room and supplies." "Unless you have a better suggestion." Adrian did not. And the truth was, the thought of leaving Kara's company brought a pang of something that felt suspiciously like disappointment. They had spent every day together for a week, and he had grown accustomed to her presence, to their conversations, to the quiet comfort of her being near. "If you are certain," he said finally, "I would be grateful, and I will find a way to repay you once I am able." "We will discuss repayment later," Kara said. "For now, focus on healing." Boren looked between them with eyes that were far too knowing. "Well then, that is settled. I will help you transport him when he is ready to be moved. In the meantime, I suggest you both prepare for what comes next. Winter is coming on, and you will be spending it in close quarters. Make sure that is truly what you want." There was weight to that statement, layers of meaning that Adrian only partly understood, but Kara simply nodded. "I am sure." The next week passed quickly. Adrian grew stronger each day, able to sit up for longer periods, to eat more solid food. The pain faded from excruciating to merely miserable, which he counted as progress. Kara prepared for his transport to her cabin, making lists of supplies they would need, checking and double-checking his splints to ensure they would hold during the journey. They talked more during those days, and Adrian found himself looking forward to each conversation. Kara had a sharp intelligence and a wry humor that emerged once she grew comfortable. She told him stories of her childhood in the clan, of hunting expeditions and festivals, of legends passed down through generations. In turn, he shared memories of his parents, of learning to farm from his uncle, of the simple pleasures of rural life. "What will you do when you are healed?" Kara asked one evening as they sat by the fire. Boren had gone to bed, leaving them alone in the warm glow of the flames. "I suppose I will return to my uncle's farm, help him with the work until he no longer needs me. It is not an exciting life, but it is honest work." Adrian paused, considering. "What about you? Will you continue living alone in your cabin?" "I do not know," Kara admitted. "It is peaceful but lonely. Sometimes I think about traveling, seeing what lies beyond these mountains, but that feels like running away rather than moving forward." She stared into the flames. "I think I have been waiting for something to change, though I could not have told you what. Now, having found you, having made the choice to help rather than ignore, perhaps that is the change I needed." "How so?" "I left the clan because I was tired of the hatred and violence. But isolation is not the same as peace. Maybe what I needed was to find a way to bridge the gap between humans and orcs, even if just in my own small way." She glanced at him. "You are a good man, Adrian. You have shown me that humans are not all the enemy my clan made them out to be. That matters more than you might think. You have shown me the same about orcs, Adrian said softly. Before you, I saw your people only as raiders and enemies. Now I see you brave, kind, strong, honorable. If one orc can be all those things, surely others can be too. Maybe there is hope for peace someday after all. Maybe, Kara said, but there was something in her voice that suggested she wanted to believe it. The day came when Boren declared Adrian well enough to be moved. They fashioned a litter of sorts, padding it with furs and blankets to cushion his injuries. Kara would carry one end while Boren took the other for the first mile. Then he would return home and Kara would continue alone, dragging the litter behind her. Take care of each other, Boren said as they prepared to depart. And Adrian, listen to what your body tells you. Do not push yourself to heal faster than nature allows. Bones take time. I will be careful, Adrian promised. The old healer turned to Kara. You have done well by him, better than many trained healers would have. You should be proud. He paused, then added more quietly, and you should be careful too. Not of him, I think, but of what others might make of this situation. Human and orc living together, even for innocent reasons, there are those who would see it as something to punish. I know, Kara said. I will be cautious. They set out in the morning chill, following trails that wound through the forest. Even with the litter, the journey was uncomfortable for Adrian, each bump and jostle sending pain through his healing bones. But Kara moved as smoothly as she could, choosing her path with care, and Boren matched her steady pace without complaint. When they reached the point where the old healer would turn back, he clasped Adrian's shoulder gently. Heal well, boy. And if you find yourself grateful to still be alive, remember who to thank. He nodded to Kara, who ducked her head in acknowledgement. I will not forget, Adrian said. Thank you for everything. After Boren had gone, Kara adjusted the litter straps and continued on alone. They did not talk much during the journey. Kara needed her breath for the exertion, and Adrian was trying not to focus on the pain. But there was a companionable quality to the silence, a comfort in shared presence that needed no words. They reached Kara's cabin in the late afternoon. It was small but well built, nestled in a clearing with a vegetable garden on one side and a small barn on the other. Smoke rose from the chimney. Kara had banked the fire before leaving that morning, and the whole place had an air of careful maintenance and modest comfort. Kara maneuvered the litter through the door and into the main room, which served as both living area and kitchen. A large bed stood against one wall, a table and chairs occupied the center, and shelves lined with supplies covered another wall. It was clean and organized, everything in its place. I will take the loft, Kara said, nodding toward a ladder that led to a sleeping space under the eaves. You will have the bed. Do not argue, she added before Adrian could protest. You need a proper bed more than I do, and I cannot have you trying to climb that ladder with a broken leg. She lifted him carefully from the litter and settled him on the bed, which was surprisingly comfortable. How does that feel? Like heaven compared to Boren's table, Adrian admitted. Thank you, Kara, for all of this. I know I keep saying it, but I do not know what other words to use. Then stop saying it and focus on healing, she said, but there was warmth in her voice. I am going to check the animals and bring in wood for the fire. Rest while I work. We can have a proper meal once I am done. Adrian watched her move around the cabin with efficient grace, unpacking supplies, stoking the fire, preparing food. He felt strange lying in her bed while she worked, but his body was exhausted from the journey and he could barely keep his eyes open. The last thing he saw before sleep claimed him was Kara standing at the stove, her silhouette strong and solid against the firelight. The days that followed fell into a new rhythm. Kara rose with the dawn to tend her animals. She kept goats for milk and meat, and chickens for eggs, and to check her trap lines and gather firewood. She would return to help Adrian with breakfast and his morning care, then spend the middle part of the day on various tasks while he rested or read from her small collection of books. Evenings they spent together, talking by the fire until Adrian's exhaustion sent him to sleep, and Kara climbed to her loft. It was a simple life, but Adrian found unexpected contentment in it. There was something deeply peaceful about the cabin and its routines, and something even more peaceful about Kara's presence. She was easy to be around, her directness refreshing after a lifetime of navigating human social niceties and unspoken rules. When she was pleased, she smiled. When something annoyed her, she said so. When she was tired, she did not hide it behind false cheer. Adrian found himself watching her more than he probably should, noticing small things. The way her braid fell over her shoulder when she leaned forward. The surprising delicacy with which her strong hands could perform fine tasks like mending or chopping herbs. The low, rough quality of her laugh when something genuinely amused her. The careful way she checked his injuries each day, her touch gentle despite her strength. He was falling for her. The realization came one evening as he watched her prepare their dinner, moving around the kitchen with unconscious grace. It should have alarmed him. She was an orc, his people's traditional enemy, and he was human. Their worlds had no place for the kind of feelings growing in his chest. But he could not bring himself to regret it. How could he, when every day with her felt like a gift? When her presence brought him more comfort than anything else in his complicated life? Kara seemed to sense the change in his attention, though she did not speak of it directly. She began to linger a bit longer during their evening conversations, sitting closer to the bed, meeting his eyes more often. There was a new tension in the air between them, not unpleasant but charged with possibility and unspoken questions. One night, about 3 weeks into his stay at her cabin, Adrian finally found the courage to address it. They had been talking about nothing in particular, the conversation winding down as the fire burned low. Kara was sitting in the chair she had pulled close to the bed, her face half in shadow. "Can I ask you something?" Adrian said, his heart pounding harder than such a simple question warranted. "You usually do," Kara said, but there was no bite to it. "Why did you really bring me here? To your home, I mean. You could have left me with Boren or helped me arrange to go back to my uncle's, but you offered to take me in to care for me yourself. Why?" Kara was quiet for a long moment, her expression unreadable in the dim light. "Would you believe me if I said I do not entirely know? I think I would. But I think you might have some idea." She sighed, a sound that seemed to come from deep in her chest. "When I left my clan, I thought I wanted solitude. I thought if I removed myself from both human and orc societies, I could find peace. And I have found peace of a sort here. But I have also found loneliness. Days pass where I speak to no one but the goats, nights where the silence feels like it might swallow me whole." She looked at him directly. "When I found you, when I chose to save you, it was like something long dormant in me woke up. The need to connect, to care for someone, to be part of something beyond my own survival. And then, spending time with you at Boren's, I realized how much I had missed having someone to talk to, someone who saw me as more than just an orc." "I see you as much more than that," Adrian said quietly. "I see a woman who is brave and kind and strong, who saved my life and has given me far more than just healing, who has become," he paused, searching for words, "who has become important to me, more important than is probably wise." Kara's breath caught audibly. "Adrian, I know," he said quickly. "I know this is complicated. I know there are 1,000 reasons why this cannot be anything more than what it is. But I needed you to know anyway, that I value you. That I care for you. That if circumstances were different, I would." He stopped, not quite brave enough to finish that sentence. "You would what?" Kara's voice was barely above a whisper. "I would court you," Adrian said simply. "I would bring you flowers and make you laugh and find ways to make you smile. I would learn everything about you and count myself lucky for the chance. I would." He met her eyes. "I would try to earn your heart, if you would let me." The silence that followed was profound. Adrian's heart hammered in his chest as he waited for Kara to respond, to reject him, to explain all the reasons his confession was foolish and impossible. Instead, she stood from her chair and moved to sit on the edge of the bed, close enough that he could feel her warmth. "You already make me laugh," she said softly. "You already know more about me than anyone else alive. And as for my heart," she reached out and took his hand, her grip strong and sure. "I think you have been earning it since the moment I found you broken at the bottom of that cliff and chose to save you instead of walking away." Adrian felt his breath stop in his chest. "Kara, I do not know how this works," she continued, her amber eyes locked on his. "I do not know if humans and orcs can build something real together, something that could withstand the prejudice and hatred of both our peoples. But I know that I wake each morning glad that you are here. That I find excuses to stay near you during the day. That I lie awake in my loft at night thinking about you sleeping below. And I know that the thought of you healing and leaving, of this cabin being empty again, it fills me with a sadness I did not think I could feel anymore." "Then I will not leave," Adrian said impulsively. "When I am healed, I will stay if you want me to. What about your uncle, your life?" "My uncle will understand. He is a practical man and he can hire help if he needs it. As for my life," Adrian squeezed her hand gently. "I think maybe my life is here now, with you, if you will have me." Kara's eyes shone with something that might have been tears, though she did not let them fall. "You would give up everything, your people, your place in human society, for me." "I would give up anything for the chance to be with you," Adrian said with absolute certainty. "I have never been more sure of anything." For a long moment, Kara simply looked at him, her face a mixture of hope and fear and wonder. Then slowly, she leaned forward and pressed her forehead against his, a gesture that felt deeply intimate even though their lips did not touch. "Then stay," she whispered. "Heal and grow strong, and when you can walk again, help me make a life here, not human or orc, but something new. Something ours." "Yes," Adrian breathed. "Yes to all of it." They stayed like that for a long time, foreheads touching, hands clasped, breathing the same air in the quiet cabin while the fire burned down to embers and the night deepened around them. It was not a kiss, but it felt like a promise nonetheless, a commitment to try for something neither of them could fully name but both of them desperately wanted. When Kara finally pulled away and climbed the ladder to her loft, Adrian lay in the darkness with his heart full to bursting. His body was still broken, still healing, but his spirit felt more whole than it had in years. He had fallen off a cliff and nearly died, but somehow that fall had led him here, to this cabin and this woman and this unexpected chance at happiness. He fell asleep smiling. The weeks that followed were some of the sweetest of Adrian's life, despite the continued discomfort of his healing injuries. He and Kara did not speak again of what had passed between them that night, but everything had changed nonetheless. There was a new tenderness in the way she cared for him, a new warmth in her smiles. They touched more often, casual brushes of hands, her palm resting on his shoulder as she passed, his fingers catching hers in moments of shared laughter. As Adrian grew stronger, he began to help with small tasks. He could sit at the table now and peel vegetables for their meals, or mend torn clothing, or work on a piece of leather crafting that Kara was attempting. They worked in comfortable silence or easy conversation, and Adrian marveled at how natural it felt, how right. "Tell me about your dreams," Kara said one afternoon as they worked together preparing preserves from the last of her apple harvest. "What did you want to do with your life before the fall?" Adrian considered the question as he carefully cut fruit into pieces. "Honestly, I am not sure I ever had grand dreams. I wanted a simple life, a farm, maybe a family someday, the satisfaction of honest work. I never aspired to greatness or adventure. And now I want this," he said simply. "I want to build a life with you here. Help you with the animals and the garden. Perhaps expand the cabin a bit, add a proper workshop. Live simply and peacefully, far from the conflicts between our peoples." He looked at her. "Is that enough? Is that too small a dream?" "It is not small at all," Kara said softly. "It is everything. Peace and partnership, and a place to belong, those are not small things, Adrian. They are the things worth living for." Winter arrived in earnest as October faded into November, bringing snow and bitter cold. Adrian's leg had healed enough that he could hobble around the cabin on crutches Kara had fashioned for him, though he still could not put his full weight on it. The forced confinement of winter weather meant they spent even more time together, and the close quarters only seemed to deepen their connection rather than strain it. They developed rituals and routines that felt sacred in their simplicity. Morning coffee drunk together at the table while dawn light filtered through the frost-covered windows. Evenings by the fire where they would read aloud to each other, from Kara's small collection of books. The easy way they moved around each other in the small space, learning each other's patterns and preferences. Kara taught Adrian some of the Orc language, laughing at his clumsy pronunciation of words that required different mouth shapes than human speech. In turn, he taught her some of the farming songs his uncle had taught him, simple work tunes that made daily tasks pass more easily. They cooked together, combining human and Orc recipes into something uniquely their own. They talked about everything and nothing, from philosophy to practical concerns to silly observations about the goats' personalities. And through it all, the connection between them deepened and strengthened, becoming something neither could imagine living without. It was during a snowstorm in late November that everything changed between them. The wind howled outside, piling drifts against the cabin walls, and the cold was so intense that even the banked fire could not fully warm the space. Adrian had hobbled to the table for dinner, and they had eaten in companionable silence, listening to the storm rage. "You should not climb to the loft tonight," Adrian said as Kara began to clear the dishes. "It will be freezing up there and all the warm air is down here. Take the bed." "I can manage in the chair by the fire." "You absolutely cannot," Kara said firmly. "You need the bed to keep your leg properly elevated. I will be fine in the loft." "Kara, you will freeze." "I have extra blankets." They stared at each other in stubborn silence for a moment. Then Adrian said quietly, "We could share the bed, if you were comfortable with that, just for warmth," he added quickly. "Nothing more, just so neither of us freezes." Kara's eyes widened slightly. "Are you certain?" "I trust you completely, and I think you trust me. And we are both adults who are perfectly capable of sharing sleeping space without anything inappropriate happening." He paused. "Unless you would be uncomfortable, I do not want to presume." "I would not be uncomfortable," Kara said slowly, "if you are truly certain." "I am certain." So that night, after the fire was banked and the cabin secured against the storm, Kara climbed into the bed beside Adrian. It was large enough that they could lie without touching, but small enough that Adrian was intensely aware of her presence beside him. He could hear her breathing, feel the warmth of her body near his own, smell the clean scent of her skin. "Thank you," Kara said softly into the darkness, "for sharing your space." Thank you for sharing your home, Adrian replied. Your life. They lay in silence for a while, the wind howling outside creating a strange sense of isolation from the world, as if they were the only two people alive in a cocoon of warmth and safety. Then Kara said, very quietly, "May I ask you something? Always. That night when you told me you would court me if you could, did you mean it? Or was it just words in a moment of emotion?" Adrian's heart began to pound. "I meant every word. I mean them still." "Then court me," Kara said, and he could hear the smile in her voice even though he could not see her face in the darkness. "We may be trapped by winter and circumstance, but there is nothing stopping us from choosing each other, from building something real between us. So court me, Adrian Zimmerman. Win my heart, though I think you already have." Joy surged through Adrian so powerfully he felt breathless with it. "I would be honored." He reached out in the darkness, found her hand, and laced his fingers through hers. "Though I should warn you, I have no experience with courting. I am likely to be terrible at it." Kara laughed, that low, rough sound he had come to love. "I have no experience being courted by anyone, let alone a human, so I think we are well matched in our inexperience. We will figure it out together." They fell asleep like that, hands clasped between them, the storm raging outside while warmth and possibility bloomed within. When Adrian woke in the morning, he found that sometime during the night they had moved closer, Kara's head now resting against his shoulder, her arm draped across his chest. His broken leg twinged at the position, but he did not care. This, he thought, was worth any amount of physical discomfort. Kara stirred as dawn light began to filter through the windows, lifting her head with a sleepy confusion that quickly cleared as she realized where she was. "I am sorry," she said, starting to pull away. "I did not mean to crowd you." "Do not apologize," Adrian said, tightening his arm around her to keep her close. "This is perfect. You are perfect." She looked at him with wonder in her amber eyes. "How are you real? How is any of this real?" "I ask myself the same thing every day," Adrian admitted. "But I have decided to stop questioning it and simply be grateful instead." They stayed like that for a long moment, warm and close and happy, while the storm continued outside and the world beyond the cabin faded to irrelevance. The days that followed were different, sweeter, charged with a new kind of energy. Adrian courted Kara as best he knew how, which mostly involved trying to make her life easier and her days brighter. He took over tasks he could manage from his limited mobility, mending clothes, preparing meals, organizing supplies. He carved her a new spoon from a piece of wood, clumsy and lopsided but made with care. He braided a bracelet from leather scraps and presented it to her with elaborate ceremony that made her laugh. Kara courted him back in her own way. She brought him the first coffee each morning, prepared exactly how he liked it. She made his favorite foods and ensured he took the best portions. She read to him in both common tongue and the Orc language, her rough voice gentle as she spoke. She sat close to him whenever possible, their bodies touching in casual intimacy. And every night, they shared the bed, falling asleep in each other's arms with the ease of long practice, though it had been mere days. They did not go beyond holding each other. Adrian was still healing, and both of them seemed content to take things slowly, to savor each step of their growing intimacy. But the tenderness between them was profound, a constant reassurance that what they felt was real and mutual and worth protecting. One evening in early December, as they sat by the fire after dinner, Adrian said, "I should write to my uncle. Let him know I am alive and recovering. He will have been worried when I did not return." Kara's expression grew troubled. "What will you tell him? About where you are, about me?" "The truth," Adrian said simply. That I was injured, that you saved me, that I am recovering in your care, that I plan to stay here with you when I am healed. He may not understand. He may try to bring you home. He may, she stopped, clearly struggling with some fear she did not want to voice. He may be prejudiced against orcs, you mean, Adrian said gently. He may be angry that I am choosing to be with one. You are right. He might be all those things. But he is also practical and fair-minded, and he raised me to judge people by their actions rather than their race. I have to believe he will see you as I do, as a good person who has shown me incredible kindness. And if he cannot, Adrian reached for her hand, then I will be sorry for it, but I will not change my choice. You are more important to me than his approval. Tears shone in Kara's eyes, though she blinked them away. I do not want to cost you your family. You are not costing me anything. I am choosing you, freely and gladly. Please believe that. She nodded slowly. I believe you, and I am grateful, more grateful than I can express. Adrian wrote the letter over the next few days, choosing his words carefully. He explained his accident, his rescue, his ongoing recovery. He spoke of Kara with warmth and respect, making clear how much he owed her. And at the end, he wrote simply, I plan to make my life here, Uncle. I have found something rare and precious, and I will not give it up. I hope you can understand and accept my choice. If not, I will always love you and be grateful for all you did for me, but this is the path I am taking. Kara would carry the letter to the nearest human settlement when the weather cleared and leave it at the trading post there for delivery. In the meantime, they continued their quiet courtship, their gentle building of a life together. Adrian's leg healed slowly but steadily. By mid-December, he could walk without crutches for short periods, though he still could not put his full weight on it for long. He began to help more substantially around the cabin, taking over the cooking entirely and helping with animal care when weather permitted. Each task he could complete felt like reclaiming a piece of independence, but more than that, it felt like contributing to their shared life in meaningful ways. On the longest night of winter, the solstice, Kara prepared a special meal: roasted goat with herbs, fresh bread, and dried berry compote. She lit extra candles, making the cabin warm and bright against the darkness outside. After they had eaten, she presented Adrian with a gift wrapped in cloth. I have been working on this in the evenings, she said, suddenly shy. It is not much, but I wanted you to have it. Adrian unwrapped the cloth to find a beautifully crafted leather belt, tooled with intricate patterns of leaves and vines. The buckle was made of polished wood, carved with what looked like two figures, one clearly human, one clearly orc, standing together. Kara, he breathed. This is beautiful. This is, he traced the carved figures with one finger. Is this us? Yes, she said quietly. I wanted you to have something that represented what we are building, something to remind you that you are not alone, that you have someone who, she stopped, seeming to gather courage. Someone who loves you. The words hung in the air between them, profound and precious. Adrian set the belt aside carefully and reached for her hands, pulling her closer. Kara, I love you too. I have loved you for weeks now, maybe from the moment I woke in Boren's cabin and saw you keeping watch over me. You are brave and kind and strong and funny, and everything I did not know I needed. And I will spend the rest of my life grateful that you found me at the bottom of that cliff and chose to save me. Kara's breath caught, and then she was leaning forward, closing the distance between them. Their first kiss was gentle, tentative, learning the shape of each other's mouths. Her tusks made the angle slightly different from kissing a human woman, but Adrian did not care. It was perfect because it was her, because it was them, because it was the physical manifestation of everything they had been building over these months together. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard, foreheads pressed together. I did not think I could have this, Kara whispered. Did not think I was allowed to want it, but you make me believe that maybe we can build something lasting, something real. We already have, Adrian said firmly. This is real. What we feel is real, and I will spend every day proving it to you if that is what you need. They made love that night, slow and tender and full of wonder. Adrian's injuries still limited what he could do, but they worked around it, learning each other's bodies with the same care they had learned each other's hearts. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the bed, skin against skin, hearts beating in synchrony. "Marry me," Adrian said into the comfortable silence. Kara lifted her head from his chest to look at him. "What? Marry me. Make this official in whatever way we can. I know human and orc marriage traditions are different, and I know there is no priest or official who would perform a ceremony between our peoples. But we can make our own vows, our own promises, bind ourselves to each other in a way that matters to us." He cupped her face in his hands. "I want to be your husband, Kara. I want you to be my wife. I want to build a life with you that lasts the rest of our days. Will you marry me?" Tears spilled down Kara's cheeks, but she was smiling. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you. I will be your wife and you will be my husband, and we will make our own traditions, our own life. Yes to all of it." They sealed the promise with another kiss, deep and sweet and full of joy. Outside, snow began to fall again, blanketing the world in white silence. Inside the cabin, two people from different worlds held each other close and dreamed of the future they would build together. They married themselves on the first day of the new year, standing before the fire in their cabin and speaking vows they had written together. There was no witness but the goats and chickens, no official document to record the union. But as they exchanged simple rings made of braided leather and wire, as they spoke their promises of love and loyalty and partnership, it felt more real and binding than any formal ceremony could have been. "I, Adrian, take you, Kara, to be my wife," Adrian said, his voice steady and sure. "I promise to love you, to honor you, to stand beside you through whatever comes. I promise to see you always as you are brave and strong and kind. I promise to build a life with you that is worthy of the gift you have given me. From this day forward, you are my family, my home, my heart. I, Kara, take you, Adrian, to be my husband," Kara said, tears streaming freely down her face. "I promise to love you, to protect you, to be your partner in all things. I promise to see you always as you are gentle and courageous and true. I promise to build a life with you that honors the choice we have made to be together. From this day forward, you are my family, my home, my heart." They kissed as husband and wife, and the cabin seemed to glow with warmth and happiness. Life settled into a new pattern after that. Adrian's leg continued to heal, and by late January he could walk almost normally, though it still ached in cold weather. He took over more and more of the work around the homestead, expanding the garden plot in preparation for spring planting, repairing fences, adding a lean-to onto the barn for additional storage. Kara's letter from his uncle arrived in early February, delivered to the trading post and retrieved by Kara on one of her supply runs. Adrian opened it with trembling hands, not sure what he would find. His uncle's handwriting was familiar, the words measured and careful. "Adrian, I will not pretend I am not surprised by your letter. I will not pretend I find it easy to accept that you have chosen to live with an orc woman. I was raised with certain beliefs about orcs, and those beliefs are hard to set aside. But I was also raised to judge people by their actions, and by your account, this woman saved your life and has cared for you with great kindness. I would be a hypocrite and a fool to condemn that simply because of her race. I will not pretend to understand the choice you have made. But you are a grown man, and you have always been thoughtful and sensible in your decisions. If you tell me this is what you want, this is where you belong, then I believe you. I wish you happiness, nephew. I wish you a long and peaceful life. And if you and your woman ever wish to visit, my door is open. I would like to meet the person who means so much to you. Your Uncle Thomas. Adrian read the letter twice, then handed it to Kara with shaking hands. She read it slowly, her expression transforming from caution to wonder. He is accepting this, she said, as if unable to believe it. He is accepting us. He is trying, Adrian said, pulling her into his arms. He is trying, and that is more than I dared hope for. It is a beginning. They cried together, tears of relief and joy, and Adrian felt a weight he had not realized he was carrying lift from his shoulders. They were not entirely alone. They had at least one person in the world who would acknowledge their union, who would try to understand. It was more than enough. Spring came gradually, the snow melting to reveal the brown earth beneath. Adrian and Kara worked together to prepare the garden, planting vegetables and herbs for the coming season. They repaired winter damage to the cabin and barn, and they began to talk about longer-term plans. Perhaps they would expand the cabin, add a proper second room. Perhaps they would acquire more animals, make the homestead more self-sufficient. Perhaps someday they might even have children, though both acknowledged that was a complicated question when it came to human-orc unions. I do not know if it is even possible, Kara admitted one evening as they discussed the future. I have heard stories of half-orc children, but I do not know if they are truth or legend, and even if it is possible, I do not know what we would be bringing a child into. What kind of life could they have, belonging fully to neither world? They would have love, Adrian said firmly. They would have parents who wanted them and would protect them. They would have this place, this land, this peace we have built. And maybe, by the time we have children, the world will have changed enough that they can find their place in it more easily than we have. But if not, if they face prejudice and difficulty, then we will be there to help them face it. Together. Kara leaned against him and he wrapped his arms around her. You make me believe in possibilities I never thought I could have, she said softly. You do the same for me, Adrian replied. In late March, they received an unexpected visitor. Adrian was working in the garden when he heard the sound of hoofbeats approaching. He straightened, shading his eyes against the sun, and felt his heart leap when he recognized the rider. His Uncle Thomas sat astride his old plow horse, looking travel-worn but determined. "Uncle," Adrian called, limping slightly as he hurried to meet him. "You came." Thomas dismounted with the careful movements of a man whose joints ached from long riding. "I told you my door was open. Thought it was time I came to see yours as well." He looked his nephew over carefully. "You look healthy, happy. The leg healed well. Well enough. It still aches sometimes, but I can walk and work without trouble." Adrian gestured toward the cabin where Kara had emerged, clearly cautious. "Uncle, this is Kara, my wife. Kara, this is my Uncle Thomas." For a long moment, the old man and the orc woman simply looked at each other, taking each other's measure. Then Thomas stepped forward and extended his hand. "Kara, I am glad to meet you. Thank you for saving my nephew's life. I am in your debt." Kara hesitated only a moment before clasping his hand. Her grip was probably stronger than she intended, but Thomas did not flinch. "I am glad to meet you as well, Thomas. Adrian speaks of you often and with great affection. Does he now?" Thomas looked between them and something in his expression softened. "Well, I can see why he stayed. You have built something good here, something peaceful." He turned to Adrian. "I brought you some things from the farm. Seeds I thought you might not have, some tools I had spare, a few books I thought you might like. They are in the saddlebags." They unpacked the horse together and Thomas stayed for dinner, sitting at their small table and sharing a meal that Kara had prepared with obvious care. The conversation was slightly awkward at first, but gradually grew more natural as the evening progressed. Thomas asked about their homestead, their plans, their daily routines. He told them news from the human settlements, gossip and updates about people Adrian had known. As the night deepened, Thomas finally addressed the elephant in the room. "I will be honest with you both. This is strange for me. I was raised to see orcs as enemies. I fought against them in my youth, lost friends to orc raids. Those things do not just disappear because I want them to." He looked at Kara directly. "But I also see how my nephew looks at you. I see the home you have built together, and I see that you make him happy in a way I have never seen before. So I am here to say that I will try. I will try to see past my old prejudices. I will try to accept this union. And I will try to be family to you, Kara, if you are willing to have me." Kara's eyes shone with tears. "I am willing. More than willing. Thank you for trying. That is all we can ask." Thomas stayed for 3 days, helping with work around the homestead and getting to know Kara better. By the time he left, there was a genuine warmth between them, a foundation for real relationship. "You take care of each other," he said as he prepared to mount his horse. "And you write to me now and then, let me know how you are doing. Maybe I will come visit again in the autumn, see how your harvest turns out." "We would like that," Adrian said, embracing his uncle tightly. "Thank you for coming, for trying, for everything. You are my family, boy. That does not change just because you married an orc." Thomas turned to Kara and after a moment's hesitation, pulled her into a brief hug as well. "You take care of him. He is all I have got." "I will," Kara promised, "with my life if necessary." They watched Thomas ride away, standing together with Adrian's arm around Kara's waist. "That went better than I dared hope," Adrian said quietly. "He loves you," Kara said. "That was clear in everything he did and said. And he is trying to love me too for your sake. That is more than I ever expected to have from a human." "You deserve love for your own sake," Adrian said firmly. "And someday I hope the world will see that. But for now we have each other, we have this place, we have your uncle trying to understand. It is enough. It is more than enough." The seasons turned. Spring became summer, lush and green. Their garden flourished, providing more food than they needed. Adrian's leg healed fully, leaving only a slight stiffness when rain was coming. They added onto the cabin as planned, creating a second room that could serve as a workshop or, someday, a nursery. They acquired 2 more goats and expanded their flock of chickens. They cleared more land for next year's planting. And through it all, their love deepened and matured, growing from the passionate intensity of new romance into something more solid and enduring. They learned to navigate disagreements with respect and honesty. They developed routines and rituals that gave shape to their days. They made love and fought and made up and worked side by side and built a life that was entirely their own. Other orcs occasionally passed through the area, and some stopped at the cabin out of curiosity or need. Kara was always cautious with them, never revealing too much about her life with Adrian. But gradually, word spread that the solitary orc woman had taken a human husband, and reactions were mixed. Some orcs were hostile, seeing it as betrayal. But others were curious, even supportive, seeing in their union a possible path toward peace between the peoples. Similarly, human trappers and traders who passed through the area began to learn about the unusual household. Most gave them a wide berth, but a few stopped to trade or simply to satisfy their curiosity. And gradually, Adrian and Kara became known in the region as the odd couple who defied convention, but caused no trouble, who kept to themselves but were helpful when called upon. Thomas visited again in the autumn as promised, and this time he brought a friend, another old farmer named Marcus, who had lost his own son in the border wars, and who was cautiously interested in meeting the orc woman who had married a human. The visit went well, and by its end, Marcus too had offered his acceptance and even his friendship. It was a small thing, these few humans willing to see past their prejudice. But it felt significant nonetheless, like the first tiny cracks in a wall that had stood for generations. Adrian and Kara might never see that wall come down entirely, but perhaps they could be part of weakening it, of showing that another way was possible. One evening in late autumn, as they sat by the fire after a long day of harvest work, Kara said, "I think I am with child." Adrian nearly dropped the cup he was holding. "You think, are you certain?" "Not completely. But I have missed my courses for 2 months, and I have been sick in the mornings. It could be illness," but she placed a hand on her still flat stomach. "I think it is a child, our child." Joy and fear warred in Adrian's chest. "A child," he breathed. "We are going to have a child. If the pregnancy takes, if the child is viable, if—" Kara stopped, clearly trying not to let hope overwhelm caution. "There are many unknowns with a human orc child, but yes. We are going to try to have a child." Adrian crossed to her and knelt before her chair, taking her hands in his. "We will face whatever comes together. If there are complications, we will handle them. If there are challenges, we will meet them. But Kara," his voice broke slightly, "we are going to be parents. We are going to bring a new life into this world, a life that is part of both of us. I cannot imagine anything more wonderful." Kara pulled him up to sit with her, and they held each other close as the fire crackled and the wind whispered outside. "I am frightened," she admitted. "I am terrified that something will go wrong, that I will not be able to carry to term, or that the child will not survive. But I am also so full of hope I can barely breathe. We made this life, Adrian, out of love and choice and possibility. Whatever happens, that is beautiful." "It is," Adrian agreed. This is, all of it." The pregnancy progressed, and though there were difficult days when Kara was sick or exhausted overall, she remained healthy and strong. They prepared as best they could for the birth, gathering supplies and knowledge from every source they could find. Borin visited and examined Kara, declaring himself cautiously optimistic about her condition. Thomas came when he heard the news and brought baby clothes he had saved from Adrian's infancy, his eyes suspiciously bright as he handed them over. Winter came again, and with it, the baby. Kara went into labor on a cold January night, the wind howling outside just as it had that first night they had shared a bed. Adrian stayed by her side through the long hours of labor, holding her hand, wiping her face, offering what comfort he could as she worked to bring their child into the world. When the baby finally emerged with a thin wail, Borin caught her carefully and placed her on Kara's chest. "A girl," the old healer said, his voice gruff with emotion. "A healthy girl." Adrian stared at his daughter in wonder. She was small but perfect, her skin a pale green that was clearly orcish but lighter than Kara's, her features a blend of both parents. She had tiny buds of tusks just visible in her lower jaw, and her ears came to delicate points. Her eyes, when she opened them, were hazel, neither Adrian's brown nor Kara's amber, but something entirely her own. "She is perfect," Adrian whispered, tears streaming down his face. "Kara, she is perfect." "She is," Kara agreed, her voice weak but full of joy as she cradled their daughter close. What should we name her? They had discussed names endlessly during the pregnancy but had not been able to decide. Now, looking at his daughter's face, Adrian knew. "Hope," he said. "Her name is Hope, because that is what she is. Hope for us, hope for the future, hope that the world can change." "Hope," Kara repeated, trying out the name. Yes, that is perfect. Hope Zimmerman. Little Hope thrived, growing strong and healthy under her parents' devoted care. She was a quiet baby, more given to studying her surroundings with serious eyes than to crying. As she grew, it became clear she had inherited traits from both parents: her mother's strength and her father's gentle nature, her mother's directness and her father's thoughtfulness. When Thomas saw his great niece for the first time, he held her with trembling hands and tears in his eyes. "She is beautiful," he said hoarsely. "She is family, and anyone who says otherwise will have to answer to me." The years passed, and Adrian and Kara built the life they had dreamed of. Hope grew into a bright, curious child who knew she was loved beyond measure. More human-orc couples began to appear in the region, emboldened by Adrian and Kara's example. The tensions between the peoples did not disappear, but they began to ease slightly, cracks appearing in old prejudices. Adrian and Kara became known as mediators of sorts, people both humans and orcs could approach when conflicts arose. They hosted gatherings at their homestead where members of both peoples could meet in neutral territory, could talk instead of fight. It was slow work, often frustrating, sometimes heartbreaking. But gradually, change came. On Hope's 5th birthday, they threw a celebration that included both human and orc guests, a thing that would have been unthinkable just years before. As Adrian watched his daughter play with children of both races, their laughter mingling in the warm spring air, he felt a profound sense of accomplishment and gratitude. Kara came to stand beside him, slipping her hand into his. "What are you thinking?" she asked. "I am thinking about how I fell 30 feet from a ridge and nearly died," Adrian said. "And how you carried me 8 miles to save my life. And how that terrible, terrifying experience led to all of this, to you, to our daughter, to the life we have built, to the changes we have helped bring about. I am thinking that sometimes the worst moments can lead to the most beautiful outcomes if we are brave enough to choose differently." "You were always brave," Kara said softly. "You just did not know it yet." "I learned it from you," Adrian replied, pulling her close. "You taught me what real courage looks like: not violence, not aggression, but the strength to be kind when the world expects cruelty. The strength to love when the world says you should hate. The strength to build when the world wants to tear down." They stood together watching their daughter play, watching the guests of two peoples who had been enemies mingle and laugh and share food and stories. The world beyond their homestead was still broken in many ways, still full of prejudice and hatred and violence. But here, in this small corner of it, peace had taken root. Love had won. And that, Adrian thought, was enough. That night, after the guests had gone and Hope was asleep in her bed, Adrian and Kara sat together on the porch watching the stars emerge. The air was warm and sweet with the scent of growing things. Inside, their daughter slept safely. Around them, the homestead they had built together stood solid and welcoming. "I love you," Adrian said, the words as natural as breathing after all these years, but no less meaningful for their familiarity. "I love you too," Kara replied, leaning her head on his shoulder. "Thank you for falling off that cliff. Thank you for being broken and bleeding and trusting me to save you. Thank you for staying. Thank you for everything." Adrian laughed softly. "Thank you for finding me, for carrying me when I could not walk, for seeing me not as an enemy but as someone worth saving. Thank you for teaching me what real strength looks like. Thank you for loving me." They sat in comfortable silence as the darkness deepened and the stars grew brighter. Two people from different worlds who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful from their meeting. A human and an orc, a husband and a wife, a family, and it was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything.